I spent 3 hours getting ready for Emma's 15th birthday. At 65, it takes me longer than it used to. The arthritis in my fingers makes applying makeup a challenge, and my hair doesn't cooperate like it once did. But for Emma, I'd make the effort. I chose a modest navy dress that Robert always said brought out my eyes, paired with the pearl earrings he gave me on our 30th anniversary, before cancer took him 5 years ago. The invitation said 2 o'clock, but I arrived at 1:30 with a carefully wrapped package containing the diamond pendant that had been my mother's, and hers before that. 4 generations of women in my family had worn it on their 16th birthday. I was giving it to Emma a year early. Something told me I needed to ensure she received it from my hands. As I pulled up to my son Michael's sprawling colonial in Fairfield County, Connecticut, I noticed the lawn was already dotted with luxury SUVs and European sedans. Strange. I was certain the invitation said 2. I checked my phone again. Yes, there it was. Join us to celebrate Emma's quinceañera Saturday, 2 p.m. I rang the doorbell, holding the small gift bag with the family heirloom close to my chest. The door swung open, and there stood Vanessa, my daughter-in-law, champagne flute in hand, her blonde hair swept into an elaborate updo that must have cost a small fortune. "Oh, Margaret," she said, her eyes widening in what seemed like surprise. "You're early." Behind her I could see at least 20 people mingling in the foyer and great room. The caterers were already serving appetizers, and a photographer was setting up in front of an elaborate balloon arch in the signature rose gold color that Emma loved. "The invitation said 2, I explained, confusion creeping into my voice. "I wanted to help set up." Vanessa forced a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Well, we decided to start a bit earlier. Family only for the first hour." She stepped aside to let me in, then added in a stage whisper to a woman I recognized as her sister, "She always wants to be the center." The words stung more than they should have. After 40 years as a high school English teacher, I'd developed a thick skin, but Vanessa had always known exactly how to pierce it. I scanned the room for my son, finding him behind the makeshift bar, mixing drinks and laughing with Vanessa's father. When he saw me, his smile faltered just slightly before he waved. "Mom, you made it!" Michael crossed the room, giving me a quick hug that smelled of expensive cologne and whiskey. At 43, he looked more like his father every day. Same strong jaw, same kind eyes, but there was something else there now. Something that hadn't been there when Robert was alive. A weariness around the edges. "Of course I made it. Where's the birthday girl?" I asked, looking around for my granddaughter. "Emma's upstairs getting ready with her friends. The makeup artist is just finishing up." He glanced at his watch. "She should be down for her grand entrance in about 15 minutes. I nodded, trying to ignore the sinking feeling in my stomach. I wasn't aware the party had been moved up. Michael had the decency to look embarrassed. Vanessa thought it would be nice to have a more intimate gathering before the main event. "Just slipped our minds to tell you." He squeezed my shoulder. "Let me get you a drink." "White wine." Before I could answer, he was called away by one of Vanessa's cousins, leaving me standing alone in a corner of my son's home, surrounded by people I barely knew. I placed my gift on the designated table, noticing it was considerably smaller than the mountain of elaborately wrapped packages already there. I found a quiet spot near the window and watched as more guests arrived, all greeted warmly by Vanessa, with kisses and exclamations about how long it had been. No one approached me. To most of them, too. I was just Emma's other grandmother, the one who lived in the modest ranch house on the other side of town, the one who had been a teacher while Vanessa's mother had been on the board of 3 charities. When Emma finally made her appearance, descending the staircase in a blush pink gown that made her look far older than her 15 years, the crowd erupted in applause. She was beautiful, her dark hair so like Robert's, cascaded down her back in loose curls. She had his smile, too, wide and genuine, lighting up her whole face. Our eyes met across the room, and for a moment, the years fell away. I saw the little girl who used to spend weekends with me baking cookies and reading stories. Then someone stepped between us, and the moment was gone. The afternoon progressed with choreographed precision. There was a catered lunch, speeches from Vanessa's family, and an elaborate cake cutting. Through it all, I remained on the periphery, included but not quite part of the celebration. When Emma opened her gifts, my small package was near the bottom of the pile. By the time she reached it, many guests had already drifted away to the bar or the patio. "From Grandma Margaret," Vanessa announced, handing Emma my gift with noticeably less enthusiasm than she had shown for the Tiffany bracelet from her own parents. Emma unwrapped it carefully, opening the velvet box to reveal the delicate diamond pendant. For a moment she just stared at it, and I feared she found it old-fashioned or unimpressive next to her other gifts. Then she looked up, her eyes shining. "Is this?" "It was your great-great-grandmother's," I said, moving closer. "It's been passed down to the women in our family for generations. I wore it when I was 16, and so did your Aunt Sarah." Emma stood up and threw her arms around me. "It's beautiful, Grandma. I love it." Over her shoulder, I caught Vanessa's tight smile. "How traditional," she said. "Traditional." Already reaching for the next gift. "Look, honey, this one's from Uncle James and Aunt Melissa." As the party wound down, I found myself in the kitchen, helping the catering staff clean up despite Vanessa's insistence that I should relax and enjoy myself. It was there that I overheard a conversation that would change everything. "Did you transfer the money for the caterer?" Michael asked, his voice low but clear in the quiet kitchen. "Yes, from your mother's account," Vanessa replied casually. "The same as the dress and the photographer." I froze, my hands deep in soapy water, as I washed a serving platter that the caterers had missed. "Vanessa, we agreed we'd discuss with her first." Michael sounded uncomfortable. "Why?" "She gave you power of attorney for a reason. Besides, it's for Emma. She'd want her to have the best party." "That money was supposed to be for her assisted living if she needs it," Michael argued. "The medical bills from Dad's treatment wiped out a lot of their savings." "Please," Vanessa scoffed. "That house of hers is worth at least $400,000. When the time comes, she can sell it. Or we can sell it for her when she can't manage on her own anymore. Honestly, Michael, I don't know why she insists on staying there alone. It's not safe, and it would be so much more practical to move her into some place where she'd have company." My hands trembled as I set down the platter. Power of attorney. I'd given Michael limited financial power of attorney 3 years ago, after a minor stroke had scared us both. It was only supposed to be used in emergencies if I became incapacitated, not for his wife to fund lavish parties. The implications were staggering. How long had this been going on? How much of my modest retirement savings, carefully built over decades of teaching, supplemented by Robert's life insurance, had been siphoned away without my knowledge? I dried my hands and slipped out of the kitchen unnoticed, my mind racing. The party continued around me, but I felt disconnected from it all, as though I were watching from a great distance. I found Emma on the patio, surrounded by friends, the diamond pendant already around her neck. "I'm heading home, sweetheart," I said, pulling her aside for a moment. It was a beautiful party. "Do you have to go already, Grandma?" Her face fell, and for a moment, she was my little Emmy again, disappointed that our time together was ending. "I'm afraid so. These old bones get tired earlier than they used to." I hugged her close, breathing in the scent of her floral perfume. "Remember, that necklace isn't just jewelry, it's our family's history. Take care of it." She nodded solemnly, touching the pendant. "I will, promise." As I drove home, the beautiful spring day had lost its luster. My hands gripped the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles turned white. The betrayal cut deep. Not just the money, though, that was serious enough. It was the dismissal, the assumption that at 65, I was already irrelevant, incapable of managing my own affairs, a burden to be managed rather than a person to be respected. My modest ranch house welcomed me with familiar silence. After Robert died, many people, Michael included, had encouraged me to sell, to move into something smaller or a senior community. But this home held 40 years of memories. It was paid for, comfortable, and most importantly, it was mine. I went straight to my home office and booted up my laptop, a skill that always seemed to surprise my son and his wife, as though technology was beyond someone of my generation. The password for my online banking didn't work. I tried again, carefully typing each character. Account access temporarily suspended. Please contact customer service. My stomach dropped. With shaking hands, I found my most recent paper statement from 3 months ago. The balance had been just over $145,000 then. Not a fortune, but enough to give me security in my later years. I'd need to go to the bank in person tomorrow. I made a cup of tea and sat at my kitchen table, the same table where I'd graded thousands of student papers, where Robert and I had shared quiet dinners after the kids left home, where I now ate most meals alone. The house creaked and settled around me as twilight fell. By the time I went to bed, anger had replaced shock. I'd spent my life taking care of others, my students, my children, my husband through his illness. I'd made sacrifices without complaint, lived frugally, saved carefully. And now, when I should be enjoying the fruits of that prudence, my own son and his wife were treating me like a senile old woman, helping themselves to my savings without so much as a conversation. I may have been 65, but I was far from helpless. Tomorrow, I would begin to take back control. They had underestimated me, a mistake many had made over the years, usually to their regret. Margaret Eleanor Williams had never been one to roll over without a fight, and I wasn't about to start now. Morning brought clarity and purpose. I dressed with care in a tailored pantsuit I'd worn to parent-teacher conferences. Professional, serious, no nonsense. The First National Bank of Connecticut opened at 9. I was waiting outside the doors at 8:50. Mrs. Williams, what a pleasure to see you, greeted Thomas Harrington, the branch manager. He'd been one of my students 20 years ago, a bright boy with a talent for mathematics and a stutter that had made him painfully shy. Is everything all right? We don't often see you in person these days. I'm afraid not. Thomas, I need to discuss some concerning activity on my accounts. His friendly smile faltered. Of course, let's speak in my office. The next hour was both illuminating and devastating. Not only had Michael and Vanessa used my account to fund Emma's birthday party to the tune of $22,000, but there had been systematic withdrawals over the past 2 years, always between $1,000 and $5,000. Small enough perhaps not to raise immediate alarms, but adding up to nearly $80,000. Mrs. Williams, I have to ask, did you authorize these transactions? Thomas asked gently. No, I said, my voice steady, despite the turmoil inside. I granted my son limited power of attorney after my stroke, for emergencies only. This is not what I intended. Thomas nodded, his expression grave. I understand. Given the circumstances, I recommend several immediate actions. First, we should revoke the power of attorney. Second, freeze your accounts temporarily to prevent any further unauthorized transactions. And third, he hesitated, you might want to consider legal counsel. Legal counsel, I repeated. The words hung in the air between us. Was I really contemplating legal action against my own son? But as I sat there looking at the printout of transactions, Emma's party, yes, but also payments to luxury retailers, high-end restaurants, even a weekend at a spa in the Berkshires, the answer became clear. This wasn't a misunderstanding or a one-time emergency. This was a systematic betrayal of trust. "Do you have a recommendation?" I asked. Thomas wrote down a name on his business card. "Patricia Lawson specializes in elder law. She's tough but fair." He paused. "And Mrs. Williams? She was also in your English class, 1997. She credits you with inspiring her to go to law school." By noon, I had an appointment with Patricia for the following day. My accounts were frozen, and the power of attorney revoked. As I left the bank, my phone rang. Michael. "Mom? What's going on?" His voice was tight with barely controlled panic. "I just got a call from the bank. They're saying there's some kind of fraud alert on your account." "Not fraud, Michael. Unauthorized use." My voice was calmer than I felt. "We need to talk, but not over the phone. Come to my house tonight." "Alone?" There was a long pause. "Mom, if this is about Emma's party—" "Tonight, Michael, 7 o'clock. I hung up before he could respond. The hours until 7 stretched interminably. I prepared as I once had for difficult parent conferences, gathering documentation, organizing my thoughts, rehearsing what needed to be said. By the time the doorbell rang, I was ready. Michael stood on my porch, looking both defensive and sheepish, the expression I'd seen countless times when he was a teenager, caught in some misdeed. "Mom, what's this all about?" I led him to the dining room table where I'd laid out bank statements, withdrawal slips, and a tally of every unauthorized transaction I'd been able to identify. "Sit down, Michael. We have a lot to discuss." His eyes widened as he took in the papers spread before him. "Mom, I can explain." "I certainly hope so," I cut him off. "Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like you and Vanessa have stolen nearly $80,000 from me over the past 2 years. He flinched as though I'd slapped him. "Stolen? That's not— we never—" He ran a hand through his hair, a gesture so like his father's that my heart ached despite my anger. "It wasn't like that, Mom. You've always been so generous with Emma. We thought you'd want her to have nice things." "Things like a $22,000 birthday party? A party I wasn't even properly invited to?" I kept my voice level with effort. "Or perhaps you're referring to the spa weekend in the Berkshires. Was that also for Emma?" He had the grace to look ashamed. "Vanessa's been under a lot of stress with her new position on the charity board. She needed to relax. And that justified taking money from my retirement savings without my knowledge or consent? We were going to pay it back," he protested weakly. "When, Michael? And how?" I leaned forward. "Your father and I worked our entire lives for what we had. We put you and Sarah through college without debt. We helped with the down payment on this house. And now, when I'm supposed to be secure in my retirement, I find that my own son has been treating my savings as his personal ATM." "It wasn't like that," he repeated. But there was no conviction in his voice. "Then what was it like? Help me understand, because right now, all I can see is betrayal." Michael stared at the papers, unable to meet my eyes. When he finally spoke, his voice was barely audible. "Things haven't been good, Mom. The firm cut bonuses last year. Vanessa's parents have this lifestyle, these expectations. We were trying to keep up. By stealing from me?" The words hung in the air between us. "I never thought of it as stealing," he whispered. "You've always been so generous. I just extended that generosity without asking. I was wrong. I'm sorry." His apology should have softened me, but it was too little, too late. "Sorry doesn't replace my savings, Michael. Sorry doesn't rebuild trust. What do you want me to do?" He looked up finally, his eyes pleading. "Tell me how to fix this." "I've consulted a lawyer," I said, watching his face fall. "Patricia Lawson. You'll be hearing from her about a repayment plan." "A lawyer? Mom, we're family." "Yes, we are. which is why this hurts so deeply. I gathered the papers into a neat stack. The power of attorney has been revoked. My accounts are frozen to anyone but me. From now on, if you or Vanessa need money, you'll ask directly, and I'll decide whether to give it. What about Emma? He asked. Her private school tuition is due next month. I raised an eyebrow. You're telling me you've been using my money for Emma's tuition as well? He nodded miserably. The last 2 years. Vanessa insisted on Westfield Academy. But with the house payment and her shopping habits, I closed my eyes briefly, letting the magnitude of the betrayal wash over me. When I opened them, my decision was made. I will continue to support Emma's education. The money will go directly to the school, not through you or Vanessa, and in exchange, I expect to be included in my granddaughter's life. Properly included, not as an afterthought or a source of funds. Relief washed over his face. Of course, Mom, absolutely. And one more thing, I added. You'll tell Vanessa exactly what has happened. Not some sanitized version, the full truth, including the legal repercussions. His relief evaporated. Mom, you don't understand how she'll react. I understand perfectly, I interrupted. But this is non-negotiable. Either you tell her, or Patricia will when she contacts you about repayment. After Michael left, I sat alone in my quiet house, emotionally drained but strangely at peace. For the first time since Robert died, I had stood up for myself, refused to be sidelined or taken advantage of. There would be consequences, certainly. Vanessa would be furious. There might be a period where I saw less of Emma, but in the long run, this reckoning was necessary. My phone pinged with a text from Sarah, my daughter who lived in Seattle. Just got a panicked call from Michael. Are you okay? Need me to come out there? I smiled, grateful for her concern. Sarah had always been the more level-headed of my children. I'm fine, I texted back. Just setting some boundaries that should have been established long ago. I'll call you tomorrow with details. That night I slept better than I had in months, perhaps years. The weight of unspoken concerns, of financial anxiety I'd tried to ignore, had been lifted. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, but I would face them on my own terms. The next morning I met with Patricia Lawson, now a poised woman in her 40s with a sharp mind and compassionate manner. Mrs. Williams, she greeted me warmly. I can't tell you how strange it is to be representing my former English teacher. Your analysis of The Crucible is still with me whenever I'm in court. Please, call me Margaret, I insisted. And I'm glad to see you've done so well, Patricia. She became all business once we were seated in her office. I've reviewed the documentation you provided. The unauthorized use of your funds under power of attorney is quite clear-cut. We have several options, ranging from informal repayment arrangements to civil action. I want to avoid court if possible, I said firmly. He's still my son. She nodded understandingly. Then I suggest we draft a formal repayment agreement with specific terms and consequences for non-compliance. I'll also prepare documents terminating the power of attorney and establishing protections for your remaining assets. And what about Vanessa? I asked. She seems to have been the driving force behind much of this. Patricia's expression hardened slightly. Both your son and daughter-in-law bear responsibility. The agreement will be with both of them. As she outlined the proposed terms, I felt a mix of sadness and resolution. This wasn't how I'd envisioned spending my retirement years, pursuing legal remedies against my own family. But neither had I imagined being taken advantage of by those I trusted most. There's one more thing, I said as our meeting concluded. I'd like to establish a trust for Emma's education, something Vanessa and Michael can't access directly. Patricia smiled approvingly. That's a wise decision. I'll draft the necessary documents. The following weeks were difficult. As expected, Vanessa was furious, alternating between tearful pleas about family loyalty and veiled threats about limiting my access to Emma. Michael seemed torn, caught between his wife's anger and his own shame. The repayment agreement was eventually signed. They would return $1,000 monthly until the full amount was restored, and with interest. It would take years, but it was a start. More importantly, it was an acknowledgement of wrongdoing and a commitment to making amends. Emma, thankfully, remained largely insulated from the conflict. At 15, she was wrapped up in her own world of friends, school, and activities. I made sure our relationship continued, inviting her for regular weekend visits and attending her school events faithfully. It was during one such visit, about a month after the confrontation, that Emma asked the question I'd been dreading. "Grandma, is something wrong between you and Mom? She gets all weird whenever your name comes up. We were baking cookies," a tradition since she was small enough to stand on a chair to reach the counter. I carefully considered my response. "Your mom and I have had some disagreements about adult things," I said finally. "But that has nothing to do with how much we both love you." She nodded, but her perceptive eyes, so like Robert's, saw more than I intended. "Is it about money? I heard them arguing. Mom was saying something about having to pay back Margaret and how unfair it was." I sighed. At 15, Emma was old enough to understand some version of the truth, but not so young that she needed complete protection from family realities. "Your parents borrowed money from me without asking first," I explained, keeping my tone neutral. "Now they're paying it back. It's complicated, but it's being resolved." "Was it for my party?" she asked, suddenly looking stricken. "The one that cost way too much?" I hesitated, then nodded. "Partly, yes." She set down the cookie dough she was shaping. "I didn't ask for all that. Grandma, the big party, the expensive dress, that was all Mom. I just wanted something simple with my close friends." Her voice dropped to a whisper. I didn't even like most of the people who came. I hugged her, flour-covered hands and all. "I know, sweetheart, and none of this is your fault. Adults sometimes make poor decisions, even parents." She fingered the diamond pendant, which she'd worn faithfully since her birthday. "This means more to me than all the other presents combined. It has history. It matters." That moment with Emma was a turning point. Whatever happened with Michael and Vanessa, my relationship with my granddaughter remained intact, perhaps even strengthened by this crisis. Over the following months, a new normal gradually emerged. Michael and I slowly rebuilt our relationship, though it would never be quite the same. He admitted that he'd felt pressured by Vanessa's expectations and lifestyle demands, but acknowledged that using my money without permission had been his choice, his failure. Vanessa remained cool toward me, but at least the open hostility subsided. 6 months after that fateful birthday party, I received an unexpected visitor. Vanessa's mother, Eleanor, appeared on my doorstep one Sunday afternoon. "Margaret," she said with a stiff nod, "may I come in? There are some things we should discuss." I led her to the living room, curious about this unprecedented visit. Eleanor Hartwell had always moved in different circles: country club membership, charity galas, designer clothes. We'd been cordial at family gatherings, but never close. She perched on the edge of my sofa, looking uncomfortable. "I've recently become aware of what Michael and Vanessa did with your money," she began, without preamble. "I want you to know that I had no idea." "I never thought you did," I replied honestly. She twisted her diamond wedding band, a nervous gesture at odds with her usual poise. "Vanessa has always had expectations about lifestyle. I fear that's partly my fault. Richard and I perhaps indulged her too much growing up." It was as close to an apology as I was likely to get from Eleanor Hartwell. "What's done is done," I said. "They're repaying the money." "Yes, well, about that." She opened her designer handbag and withdrew a checkbook. "Richard and I would like to accelerate that process. We're prepared to cover the remaining balance, immediately." I stared at her in surprise. That's very generous, but it's not necessary. Michael and Vanessa need to take responsibility for their actions. They are, she insisted. Vanessa has finally agreed to work with a financial advisor. Michael is looking for a better position. But in the meantime, this situation is causing strain that's affecting everyone, including Emma. She wrote out a check and placed it on the coffee table between us. Please, Margaret, for the sake of family harmony. I looked at the check. $73,000 is the exact amount still outstanding. Part of me wanted to refuse on principle, but another part recognized that Eleanor was offering more than money. She was extending an olive branch, acknowledging the wrong done to me, and trying to heal the family breach in the only way she knew how. I'll accept this on one condition, I said finally. That it's considered a loan to Michael and Vanessa. They'll repay you instead of me. I want them to understand that actions have consequences. Eleanor nodded slowly. That seems fair. I'll make that clear to them. As she was leaving, she paused at the door. You know, Margaret, I've always admired how you raised your children. Michael is a good man despite this lapse in judgment, and Emma adores you. She smiled slightly. That pendant looks beautiful on her. Family traditions matter. It was the most personal conversation we'd ever had. The repayment from Eleanor changed the family dynamic in unexpected ways. With the immediate financial pressure lifted, Michael and Vanessa could focus on addressing the underlying issues that had led to their poor decisions. They began working with a financial advisor, as Eleanor had mentioned, and Michael eventually found a better position at a different firm. More significantly, the clear boundaries I'd established earned me a new level of respect. I was no longer just Michael's mother or Emma's grandmother, but Margaret Williams, a woman who stood up for herself, who had rights and dignity that needed to be acknowledged. The most profound change, however, was in my relationship with Emma. As the tensions between the adults gradually eased, she began spending more time with me, not just during scheduled visits, but dropping by after school or calling just to chat. She seemed to appreciate my direct approach to the conflict, the way I'd insisted on honesty and accountability without venom or revenge. A year after that fateful birthday party, as we celebrated Emma's 16th birthday with a simple dinner at my home, her choice, much to Vanessa's chagrin, my granddaughter presented me with a gift. It's not much, she said shyly, but I thought you might like it. Inside the wrapped package was a framed photograph of the two of us, taken at her school's winter concert. Next to it was a handwritten letter. Dear Grandma, it began, thank you for showing me what real strength looks like. Not the kind that makes a lot of noise or demands attention, but the quiet kind that stands firm when it matters. I'm wearing your pendant as I write this, thinking about all the women in our family who wore it before me, including you. I hope that when I'm your age, I'll have even half your courage and grace. Love always, Emma. I blinked back tears as I finished reading. This is the most precious gift I've ever received, I told her, pulling her into a hug. As I looked around the table at my small but healing family, Michael trying harder, Vanessa making an effort despite herself, Emma growing into a thoughtful young woman, I felt a quiet satisfaction. The past year had been painful, yes, but necessary. I'd reclaimed not just my financial security, but something far more valuable, my voice, my agency, my place in the family as someone to be respected rather than exploited. At 66, I was far from the helpless old woman Vanessa had once dismissively talked about moving into assisted living. I was strong, capable, and determined to live my remaining years on my own terms. There would be more challenges ahead, certainly. Relationships damaged by betrayal take time to fully heal. Trust, once broken, is rebuilt slowly, in small increments of consistent honesty and respect. But watching Emma wear her great-great-grandmother's pendant seeing how she'd absorbed the lessons of this difficult year, not just about money, but about integrity, consequences, and standing up for oneself. I knew that something valuable had emerged from the pain. A legacy more precious than diamonds or dollars. The understanding that one's worth isn't determined by age or circumstance, but by the courage to demand the respect one deserves. As the evening wound down, Emma helped me clear the dishes while Michael and Vanessa prepared to leave. Same time next Saturday. Grandma, Emma asked, referring to our standing cookie baking date. I'll be here, I promised. And Emma? Thank you for your beautiful letter. It means the world to me. She smiled, Robert's smile, and hugged me once more before following her parents out the door. The house fell quiet again, but it was a peaceful silence now. Not the lonely one that had once felt so oppressive after Robert's death. I made myself a cup of tea and sat in my favorite chair by the window, watching the stars appear in the clear Connecticut sky. Whatever the future held, I would face it with the same determination I'd shown this past year. Margaret Eleanor Williams had reclaimed her place in her family's story, not as a footnote or an afterthought, but as the author of her own chapter, still being written one day at a time. If you like this story, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share your impressions of this story in the comments. To listen to the next story, click on the box on the left.